traffic has been really bad this evening, so I get a lot of people are late after 5:30, and so thanks so much for coming. This is great. This is the expandable, the accordion table, it looks like. So, ma'am, I don't know if you're comfortable there, fine. But if you want to kind of be part of the circle, I encourage you to come on
Well,
over.
here, there's so rather sit next to her.
So we are going to, we're going to, this will be take two. Hopefully a little faster, but I will faster. Let's just really quickly do introductions again. My name is Tim Karpoff. I'm an independent planner and facilitator. I've been hired by the city to help with these focus groups. And this is the fifth of a series of 5 so-called focus groups to get input and recommendations for the city as it develops a new agreement with Comcast. And let's just go around real quickly because we have a couple new folks who came in even before those folks. So, yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm Jane E., and I'm with the City of Albuquerque in the legal department, and I'm a lawyer.
My name is Peter Ames. I'm the technology director for the City of Albuquerque.
I'm Dave Matthews. I'm the Deputy Director for Cultural Services Department, City of Albuquerque.
I'm Stuart Goldberg. I'm just a concerned citizen.
Welcome, Stuart.
Bill Nevis, I'm a writer and I work on cultural programs.
Great, thanks. Hi.
My name is Porcher. I was a former quote unquote employee.
Porcher.
Porcher.
Hi.
Hi, Magdalena Romero. With an organization called A Cry for Help Incorporated.
I'm sorry, first name again, ma'am?
Magdalena.
Magdalena, thank you.
I'm Lisa Michael, and I'm an advocate for Magdalena's corporate company and Cry for Help for organization.
Lisa, welcome. Hi.
Lauren Dale, free speech advocate, I guess.
Okay, Lara, welcome.
Simon Polkowski, a concerned citizen and former producer at Channel 27. I was run by Colin Wood.
Simon, welcome.
Alan Cooper. I was the host for about 7 years on Channel 27.
Thanks, Alan. And Mike,
Next week, independent.
welcome, Mike. And
I'm Lindsay Burkhardt, and I work for Albuquerque City Council.
okay, with apologies for folks who did this before, I think it's really important for the folks who came to try to get the background of this. So, as I was saying, even before the meeting started, we've had 4 of these already, and we've learned an awful lot. And I think I hope I have a better way of explaining than the first meeting you came to Lara and Simon. But
Could you mention where the other ones were?
the other ones were
General.
we had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday last week, and last night and tonight. And the others were at Alamosa Community Center and
That's on south of Yale.
off of Coors. But I think there's a list there.
If you look at that.
Okay, we've got a couple more folks coming in. Welcome. I'm going to try to give a little background while you're signing in, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
So the background is the relationship between local jurisdictions and the and local cable TV providers by federal statute has to be governed by an overall franchise agreement. This agreement then gets codified into law by in this case, the city council. The last agreement was done in 2002. It's going to run out in 2017. So the city is preparing for negotiating next year with Comcast to come up with a new agreement. The agreement will have to abide by federal statute, but could include other things as well. And so typically, a lot of times what these agreements cover are how many channels are provided, how many channels must be provided over broadcast TV, how many maybe public access channels there might be. There might have to do with the quality of the signal, the technical issues about how many megabytes and so forth go across the signal, how many additional fibers need to be in the ground, how many points of access are there at various institutions around the city. So libraries and hospitals and the internal communication, CNM and UNM, all that, as well as GovTV. And so, and then all about billing practices, customer service, all of these kinds of things. What usually these agreements talk about. This agreement, we hope, well, there's a city staff working group that's collecting lots of information, like in franchise agreements in other cities that might provide some lessons for how to make sure the community is well served. There is, they've been doing some information gathering on customer service with Comcast so far. And there's a need, and part of their information gathering is to have these focus groups where we're trying to not only get input from the public, general public, but also representatives from media outlets. A couple of us were there last night. We got some TV stations. Last week we were hearing from some of the, like APS and CNN and UNM and the state agencies that serve this area. And we were also we were hoping to get government officials, but they've been doing other things. Anyway, so that's
Excuse me, when you say federal government official, you talking about?
local, the city council and commissioners and
Well, we have government workers here. Yeah?
government workers, but yeah, but I was talking about elected public officials. That's what we had intended on that. That was one of the intents of last week.
But just, pardon me,
Yeah.
this woman though is a liaison with the city council?
Yes, she is. Lindsay is.
So she's in contact with elected officials?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
And she's real good. So that's the background. Now, I do want to say that we've become aware that when we pose this question back here, how can Comcast become a better community partner? A lot of the working group folks, I think, and myself included, thought that this really means how does Comcast provide more to the community? I have learned, I don't know if I can speak on behalf of the working group folks, that the community, the public, general public members, to yourself, really inferred something quite different. And that community and community partner had a lot to do with the type of community programming on public access, public educational government TV stations. And we are, I think, and again, speaking personally, are really appreciative of this expansion of our understanding of things. So we've already gotten a whole bunch of new ideas on what to include in the negotiation process. Ideas around transparency and decision-making, about monitoring the agreement, and some other things. So thank you for coming. But I do want to say that what we're trying to do is get some ideas on what we can cover in the overall franchise agreement. I know that there's a contract issue between the city and who actually provides programming on the public access TVs. And so there's the UPublic quote-unquote thing. And that, while there are points of intersection, I do want to say that's a separate issue from the franchise agreement itself. But your experience on there may help inform the city as to what should be in the franchise agreement. So we're glad you're here, we want to hear from you, but I do want to just say that it'll be easy to mix up these issues about the overall ordinance, about all cable TV services, and the government access channel issues that I know you guys are very concerned about. So we want to hear whatever you have to say, but we will be filtering it through this whole idea of the whole agreement. Is that, am I stating that enough? I'm looking at the working group folks, Lindsay. Okay, now, what we want to do is just get your ideas on, from your experience in working with Comcast, and your ideas on what the city should be doing going forward in trying to deal with all the access, technical, programming guidelines that you think need to be in the agreement. So, any questions about what the background is here? Yeah, Laura.
Also, just on behalf of the folks who have shown up here, it was really difficult to even find out about these meetings.
Mhm.
Most of the people have gotten here through word of mouth. It wasn't like it was posted everywhere, and you had to know to go on the city website to even understand that that was happening. So there should be a ton more people here than there are. And I'm sure everybody always complains that there's not enough publicity or what. But I still, again, I question your statement, because we had this discussion at the last meeting, which is, I feel that it's very important that the producers and the voice of the public access station be heard about this throughout, because cable subscribers are being charged for that service. So Comcast is billing their customers for a robust public access station that has been driven into the ground, and yet they're still paying for it. So to say that that's some kind of secondary issue that doesn't fit into that, one of the reasons this community is here is because Comcast, from the standpoint of the cable subscribers and that 44-cent tax, has been a terrible community partner. You can't bill somebody for a service and then claim that, oh, it's just on the city to do that. You're billing for it. So this is very much a Comcast issue, and I think it's very critical that producers who have lost their programming because of ludicrous transactions between the city and apparently Comcast, we've got closed-door meetings between Comcast members and folks who are here in the room right now. So this is not some separate issue. This is all of a piece as to why we are here tonight, which is the trust, the public trust, and the monies from the public have been misused egregiously, and Comcast is part of it. They charge them for that. If they weren't involved in billing the public, you're absolutely right, it would be a completely separate issue. It is one and the same, and the lack of trust in this room is palpable.
Okay, so again, what would be a way of moving forward?
So I would like,
Knowing that,
like these
yeah, we'd
folks
like to hear from
speak.
everybody.
Yeah.
What would be, we'd like to hear about your experience
Well,
and your
if you don't
concerns.
mind, she authorized me, Rosemary Sanchez, who is the sole surviving cable board member, so she was the one who's supposed to be overseeing all of these transactions. She fell, I saw her foot, it's swollen the size of a basketball, or she would be here. So she authorized me to read this as her statement as a cable board member as to what she feels would be the way to go forward. So if you don't mind, I would love to
Well,
read
I
it.
just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance.
No,
So,
absolutely,
go
but
ahead.
she is a key part of this.
Okay?
My name is Rosemary Sanchez, and I've been a cable franchise and hearing board member since 2010. Since I have never been officially terminated from my position, I'm writing to you as the sole cable board member.
More slowly and
I'm sorry.
louder, because it's not coming from.
Gotcha. My name is Rosemary Sanchez, and I have been a cable franchise and hearing board member since 2010. Since I have never been officially terminated from my position, I am writing to you as the sole cable board member to date. My issue is as follows. It is my understanding that the Cable Franchise and Hearing Board is the contractual authority over all matters pertaining to the use and allocation of PEG funds. Yet the IPEG Committee, a self-appointed group comprised of full-time city employees, has been meeting behind closed doors without the oversight of City Council, the Cable Board, or the public, and allocating funds outside the scope of the contractual requirements for public access. When I first found out about the IPEG committee, I tried to sit in on one of their meetings and was denied access. which was a clear violation of the Open Meetings Act. Because I persisted, I was finally allowed to attend, although City Council member Ray Garduno was denied entry. What I initially discovered is that the IPEG committee was allocating funds to their members for out-of-state conferences when the money was earmarked for capital outlay. In the process of looking into this discrepancy, I became aware of numerous other violations of city codes and ordinances. So I began to speak publicly about the lack of transparency by the IPEG committee and the lack of participation in the decision-making process by the cable board. Due to the flawed RFP process, again overseen behind closed doors by the IPEG committee, and the subsequent award of the public access contract to the least qualified competitor against the unanimous recommendation of the cable board, I have decided to request several specific remedies. 1, reinstate immediately the cable board as the authority over the PEG fund. 2, demand that the IPEG members who have exceeded their term limits step down and that they have 1 cable board member on their committee. Also, that all their meetings and minutes are posted and open to the public. 3, terminate the contract for public access with UPublic due to lack of compliance with contractual requirements and issue a new RFP as soon as possible. Thank you for your time and consideration, Rosemary Sanchez.
Thank you. Could you either submit that or send that electronically?
Absolutely.
Because it's going to be,
You
it's,
can keep this copy.
Lindsay,
This is for
yeah.
you.
Lindsay takes detailed notes.
Are we gonna get any feedback on what she just read?
Well, I think let's make sure everybody can talk, including you, Ellen. I really like all the producers to be able to be heard.
Actually, I think tonight is really to hear just what Ms. Sanchez is doing, is offering some remedies to problems that you have identified. And I think that that's the important piece of, important topic of conversation tonight.
Well, so
So
go ahead.
that's great. Let's keep going, if you don't mind. This is great, great opening. I don't know if anybody else would like to, we had designed this as basically a conversation among those who will, but to focus more on how do we go forward in a better way. And again, the original idea was the overall framework for the franchise agreement, but you all may have very specific elements of that that you want to focus on. That's terrific. So, yes, it's or share. Thank you.
Well, I know you said we're looking at the overall frame, but being a community partner, I would say that is the basis of the frame, are the people. So, you know, us talking about what meant the world to us is really important. And I'm not saying you're not saying that, but it was just a loss that we lost that station. It was terrible. That's where I learned to edit, to work with all the camera equipment at a young age. Like, we're talking about community, not just adults, but kids, teenagers. That's where I started as a teenager, 16 years old, working there. And it still kind of gets to me. It does get emotional sometimes thinking about it. But when all of this was going on, it would have been great, and I think what really should stem into the framework is Comcast talks about being a community partner, but it kind of felt like they abandoned us during that, like there was no backing. And if we had that community partner that Comcast says they are, we probably would have had a shot at actually fighting and keeping what we had, what we worked so hard for.
Thank you. Others? Magdalene, please.
I took on this quote unquote and had directors and production for our film. We did a Cry for Help Incorporated. It was about victims it wasn't just about certain types of victims, all victims, because our elderly and our veterans and the children and divorce cases, and we did it all. We are a nonprofit organization for victims of domestic and judicial abuse. And when quote unquote left, we lost a lot of people that were watching us. We had a lot of people coming in, wanting to be guest speakers. We did good for the community. And it kind of upset me that we had to, it was dissolved, you know, and I think it needs to come back. We have to have the right to have freedom of speech, let people be aware of what types of abuse are out there. You know, it's not just domestic violence, it's all types of abuse. And people need to be aware in our communities what really goes on. And I've worked with the FBI, I've worked with attorney generals, I've worked with everybody on a lot of my issues. And I've gotten results, but I think the community needs to know that we're out there to help everybody. And so if we can get quote unquote back, it was good. It was good for all of us. It taught us a lot about sharing and caring about the people, and we need to get it back.
Thank you. Steve? No. Oh, I'm sorry, I see that.
No.
My apologies. Good evening. Just to let you know, my name is Tim Karpoff. I live in South Valley and I run meetings. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, we just heard about it today, and you know, I don't really have any specific thing, obviously, but obviously the issue is important in public cases.
And your name's sir?
Neil.
Leo?
I'm Marcel.
And Marcel? Marcel.
We're new here in Albuquerque. So
Well, welcome.
we're concerned about the community and its needs, and it's shocking. If we're concerned about our children and where they're going, if we want to have a healthy community, we have to have all the needs for what they were talking about, the program. When we want to, excuse me, make progress in our community, that's what we should do. Otherwise, why are we complaining when kids are distracted and they do things that are not productive to them and to their community? This program will help them to be productive and caring for their community so that we can have a healthy community.
Thank you. Simon?
I was going to ask then, you know,
Please, everybody please speak slowly and loudly because there's a lot of reverb here.
Contract obligations. Who oversees that these contract obligations are fulfilled by the city, by Comcast, and by people that are hired to manage public access channels because if people don't believe that they are being managed or supervised properly, what kind of recourse do they have? Because it's obvious that there's a few of us that believe that obligations are not being fulfilled.
Right.
And what is our recourse? How can we have a formal recourse that oversight? And because this is public, this concerns the public, that this be in front of everybody, that nothing be closed, that this be open to all of us.
And do you have a suggestion? You talked about formal and implied informal, which
Yes.
I get that. What would help guarantee more transparency or better supervision?
Maybe as this woman read the statement by a present cable board member, maybe this should be investigated. Is this the remedy in the cable board? And why, if it is, why was it bypassed?
For 2 years?
Whatever, yeah. That there should be like an investigation. And why was the procedure before didn't work or was not, what do you call it?
Enforced.
Yes. So I think we should ask those questions, that these questions need to be asked and answered by those who are responsible. And since that is the city, which I assume the administration, also the city council, and Comcast, and I don't know, is it the FCC, and maybe the FCC should be asked also to see if, in fact, these procedures were followed, and if they weren't, why not? Or if they're weak, how can they be strengthened?
So, I am going to be, my lens tonight is the future. And so what I'm getting from you are a couple things. One is that there needs to be a very clear and easily communicated structure for identifying what the contract obligations, thank you, are.
All parties.
On all parties, that there needs to be a very clear path for monitoring process.
Yes.
And some sort of recourse, very clear guidelines, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on what to do if people seem to think that there's not, that the contract's not being fulfilled.
I believe like even the city has an attorney, inspector general. If you have a complaint about the city or something, you go to the inspector general and they do an inspection. And if there be a formal process, so people say, you know, that they're not allowed into these meetings, and if not, why? There should be like a formal response. Well, this is the reason why.
Clarify what requires adherence to the Open Meetings Act and what doesn't, and if it doesn't, it better be clearly spelled out why, is what you're saying.
So. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just trying, you see what I'm saying? I'm not going to, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to say, let's go investigate. I'm saying,
I understand.
The lens is, what do we do now to make it better? And you've got great ideas.
A structure or whatever, you know, a formality, so it's not accusation, rebuttal, or something like this, that people can go, well, here's the process.
Got it. Okay.
And you can,
Transparent.
yeah. And it'd be simple, not too complicated, and there could be, you know, a response, so people are, you know, are happy, are content.
Well, at least be aware, yeah. I don't know if everybody will ever be happy, and I get your point. Yes, Alec.
I don't know if it was brought up in other meetings, since I didn't even know the existence of these meetings until yesterday afternoon. That's why you don't see a lot more people here. I think the fact that there wasn't, I guess that there was some attempt to, you know, reach out, but I don't know about it. So that makes me suspicious right away, you know, that you don't want a lot of people to come in and give you their input. I'm just telling you that what the appearance is.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And something that hasn't been mentioned, well, wasn't mentioned last night, and make sure that it doesn't slip by us unless you've already heard it, is quote unquote, and any media worked with several schools around the city and went into the classroom and did training, went out to do stories, go out and interview people, and it was done on a regular basis with Media Arts Community Charter School, which I helped found, and it's up on Wyoming and Central. Washington and Central, and several others. I think Amy Beal was involved. South Valley Academy was involved, and the kids were really. I just got to tell you, because I'm just a. Let me rephrase that. I am a host, and a damn good one, and I observed that process going on with several of the classes, and it was really exciting. They were really engaged and excited about learning how to use the tool in a good way. Video.
Such as Portia.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we weren't an isolate just throbbing out there in the wilderness.
And again, it seems to me that there are distinctions, but real helpful lessons between the overall agreement and the individual contracts between the city and a vendor. So, for instance, let me see if I'm getting it right. What I'm taking from that is guidelines on working with schools on community programming should be considered as part of the overall agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about specific schools necessarily,
It's a
but,
community television outlet.
so community schools
And
ought to be
more
involved.
widely, we cast our nets to bring people in and get them trained. I thought with what we had, really huge volunteers. I mean, here are volunteers here, and I was volunteer, and I think we did a hell of a lot of great work with very, very little budget.
And it refers back to
And
Porter's
conflict.
remarks and.
Ongoing conflict with the city, who kept saying, they said, go find us a place to move to. We must have gone to 12 or 14 different sites where the city said, well, this might be all right. And so we get people down there and we start measuring and trying to figure out if we have the space. And they say, oh, that's no good. And it was such a toy on the end of a stick approach. And I'm offended in retrospect because I didn't realize how much of a ulterior motive was involved. I thought we were looking in good faith to find another location. And other people here, I'm sure, corroborate. Steve can certainly do that.
Okay.
I mean, we went to all sites, all warehouses, ex-gas stations, and they were, in my opinion, after a while, I just quit going because I realized that there's no substance. They're just stringing us on and wearing out our energy.
Okay. I'm wondering if there are other folks who haven't, hold on just a second, Simon, let me just check in with other folks in the room. Do you have either experience with Comcast or recommendations?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Of all the meetings, has there been anybody from the group that's in charge of the programming, you public, show up?
I don't believe anybody from the public.
That's disgusting.
That's what?
That's disgusting, that they didn't show up to any of the meetings.
And it happened to us too.
I mean, we're here to have a debate or to talk both sides. They're not here.
Well, I understand your concern. I would say that even if they were here, I would like to hear their ideas on how to make the agreement better.
They should give their point of view too. And we live in a democracy and they're not here.
Okay.
That's a bunch of shit. Okay.
They're here.
So,
George Carlin said that's it.
please.
I just have one thing. Before, I mentioned all those things before about formality. I believe what this woman read, Rosemary Sanchez's statement.
Yeah.
I believe there should be a formal response from city council and the city. Was this the proper channel? There should be a formal response to that statement, I think, from city council and the administration on the cable board, its validity and so on. I think that, that first of all,
Okay.
that there should be some kind of a formal response to that statement. And if not, an explanation of why not, I believe. And that would be, a good faith, that'd be in good faith on part of city council, the public, and Comcast. Also, that the three of them respond to that statement. I believe there should be a formal response.
Well, as I said, this is part of the information gathering phase. This is a staff group that's collecting information, so that could be passed on. But I don't know that anyone here can make any commitments.
I just wanted to.
What we can commit to, which is what Lindsay has already said, is that the report from these meetings will be posted. So people can see.
I thank you for that. I just wanted to put that statement in.
Got it.
Do you know that YouTube knows that this is happening?
The-
Was YouTube invited?
You public?
Are you public?
I don't think anyone here tonight was the actual person who
But
did
they
some
were
of the
contacted.
noticing, but we sent out a press release
Yeah.
to media outlets, we did Twitter, we also did postings on websites, and then I sent out invitations
Yeah,
and
it's not a
heads up to coalitions and
It's not a
neighbors.
criticism, I'm just,
Yeah.
because that's what happened to us when we tried to contact the city. You know, we would come and the city wouldn't be there.
But we did hear your suggestion about starting to try to expand that and looking at public service announcements, and I think that was a really valuable piece of information that this group was able to bring forward. So thank you.
So I'd be interested if others, Steve, welcome, see you.
So can you introduce
hi.
yourself?
Hi, I'm Steve Kramer. You and I don't know each other, but I know a lot of the other folks. And that's it. I'm from Berkeley Media. I also associate with a lot of other organizations. So,
And the gentleman right behind you, Laura?
Oh, who, me? Oh, okay, I'm Steve. Hi, Steve Ranieri, Bournemouth.
Steve and Steve.
Yes.
All right, I'm wondering if there are other comments. Lisa, anything that you'd like to add to this or reinforce? Bill, comments on your experience with Comcast or how the city's relationship with Comcast and its service to the public can be strengthened?
Yeah, I don't really have a speech to make, but I do, as a citizen and as a journalist, I really miss the public access and the programming that quote unquote was doing. I think it was very valuable to this community. I don't know the ins and outs of how it isn't here anymore, but it seems like if Comcast is a partner to this community, they should in some way get involved in bringing back that very important community service.
Okay. Were you going to say something?
Oh, no, I agree, everybody was,
Okay.
what happened to Channel 27?
Just-
It disappeared.
Just checking. Or share and then over where?
Out of curiosity, what websites were the meetings posted on?
speak a little louder?
I'll try, I'm sorry, I'm sick.
What websites
The
were?
City of Albuquerque's website, so the specific link that takes you right to where. all
Where was
the-
it posted? Any invitations posted? You said Twitter. The city.
Twitter,
City.
I wasn't the actual person who did the posting, but it was on the councilors' websites. It was on,
Was it on any website where a lot of people mostly frequented?
yes, we have a lot of traffic to those sites. So what would be your suggestion as to how to maybe maximize that effort? What would you do differently when you're noticing and trying to get information out to the public?
The alibi is a pretty good way to do it.
I believe it was also in the journal too.
Albuquerque Free Press.
But the alibi.
Alibi, let's just ask, alibi is one suggestion.
The alibi.
Albuquerque Free Press.
Free Press.
Okay,
And, I'm sure that.
sorry,
Peace and
just a second,
Justice-
Steve. Yeah.
The email that I gave you, you can, I have over 4,000 followers, so
That's
just to
awesome.
expose
Well,
everything.
thank you for signing in, and as this process moves along, we'll have that contact information.
Now, Steve,
I was just gonna say that Peace and Justice also maintains a fairly thorough calendar and is always a good way to access a lot of people from the advocacy community and otherwise.
You know,
And,
I think we should.
and we
have
get-
that information.
I get press releases and I didn't know about it until the second meeting. And it was only because of Sue that sent this kind of last minute thing. And most people sitting here are pretty tuned into the community. I'm especially tuned in and like just had not a clue. So.
Well, that's good
all right.
information here.
Thank you.
yeah, Laura?
So again, the one thing I just really, and this I think is more directly Comcast related,
Okay.
and I just can't stress it enough. So, because, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I just heard from Rosemary when I was talking to her, and she said, "Did you see the Charlie Rose show from 2 nights ago?" I said, "No." She said it was Charlie Rose talking to, I believe his name is Tim Wheeler, who's the head of the FCC.
Yeah.
He was asking him about all these negotiations and literally stuff to do with public access and that sort of stuff. And according to Rosemary, and this would be something you should watch if you can,
Yep.
Tim Wheeler said, basically, the cable companies are trying to take back all this stuff that doesn't really belong to them, and we're going to fight it. So speaking to that, the 9 channels that have been allocated over this contractual period till to 2017. I have a number of articles about various other municipalities where this has come up. There's a renewal, and the cable companies are trying to negotiate the valuation. How many are you using? How many do you keep? And what keeps happening is the cable companies, what they try to do, and I'm not saying this is like rumor, this is in articles all over. What they try to do is say, well, let's say we're having a pretend meeting with Comcast right now about the 9 channels. And they're going to ask, okay, how many are you guys using right now? Oh, Ed Channel, the 2, and so 4. So what they will do is say, oh, okay, well, you guys can keep the 4, and we'll, no. And that's what one of these articles about. The municipality went, wait a sec, we own 5. It's our public property.
Right.
If you're going to take it back, you're going to have to pay market rate for it.
Mm-hmm.
So my concern right now, and I think it's a very basic city issue.
Right.
This one article I had that was based on the Verizon Wireless acquisition of cable company Spectrum. So this means the cable companies acquire these channels, sell them to the wireless companies. In California alone, they made $3.6 billion. So your city is sitting on an asset in the millions of dollars that if you don't get control of it beforehand, and Comcast just says, oh, you guys are only using 4, bye, you've just lost, I don't know, based on some of these market rates, you've lost at least $10 million, maybe more like 20.
And once again,
So I would like this city to be very responsible to the consumers, because those are our airwaves.
right.
They're not Comcast.
And they're not even the
My
city.
request is that article, either a link to it. Or
I'm gonna leave all of this
That's
to her.
correct, that's terrific. So we're talking about valuation, we're also talking
A
about
public
access.
asset. This is a public asset. Fine, if the city wants to negotiate that only 4 channels, since that's what's being used,
Yeah,
that's fine. I
Okay.
mean, that seems reasonable to me. Maybe we should keep 1 extra just in case. But the remainder cannot be just, oh, well, we'll give them back.
Okay.
No, they belong to us and they're very expensive real estate right now.
thank you.
I have a question.
Just,
for
Mine, Simon wanted to jump in earlier.
But why sell them when you can lease them? And I think the city should always hold on to them, because it's like a park or something, a right of way. Once you sell it, it's gone, and it's better to manage it and to lease it than to get rid, because it's worth more as rental property in the long run, or you can, it's a capital that expands, okay? If you sell it, it's a capital that's gone. And I believe it should be a non-issue really selling it, because the city's gonna grow. That's what they always promote. So I believe that they should, it should be held in trust for the public.
Got
Well,
it.
just
Thank you.
speaking to that, this whole dialogue, this is from the Seattle Times when they were being challenged about their station. And it's from 2003. And so they're having these exact discussions. They're trying to decide, do we sell them off, do we lease them, whatever, but we don't just hand them back. And you will see article after article for various municipalities all over the country having this very discussion. And I just pray that our city council will get control of this, so when these negotiations happen, if they negotiate that we only have 4 left, then we had darn tootin' better get, either, as he said, retain it as public access that we lease out or something, or get literally market value for it, not the $250,000 they offered back in 2010.
Okay. Alan, you wanted to?
So I'm trying to get clarity about what you just said and what Simon said. So the channels, is your view of the channels is that they belong to the people in the community?
That's part of the Cable
No, I know,
Communications
but
Act, yeah.
hold on. But
Yeah.
the city doesn't do more than make, when you say the city manages it, what does that mean to me? I'm not sure.
Well, honestly, I wish it meant more than it does, but what they're supposed to be is just providing to the public the maximal availability and use of their resource. The airwaves belong to the public. Yes, they have been sort of bought down by corporations over decades, but in truth, the original 1930 whatever Communications Act still holds. It belongs to us. It's an asset that is for the public. And so therefore the public, that's why we need transparency from the IPEC committee. This is our asset that is not supposed to be sold, but if in fact it is going to be, which has happened all over the country, then it needs to be transparent, it needs to have public agreement on it, and there needs to be a market rate value on it. Now deciding whether that is or isn't right, it's still going on all over the country. These things are being sold off as we speak. California has lost most of its public access stations.
I heard.
So this is a major deal, it's a lot of money, and it needs to be managed responsibly by the city in this negotiation with Comcast. And the public needs input. It's our property, it's our virtual land.
Thank you. Pretty good. Any other recommendation? These are very substantive and helpful recommendations. Thank you so much. And are there others? Yes, or other aspects on how we can make sure these happen, or even negotiating strategies on them? But Steve, go ahead.
Well, just before I came up here, I had been talking to some people, and they couldn't come today. So they asked me if I could say something for them. They gave me, I tried to scribble it down as fast as I could. So,
okay.
But they said, would you please, tell this to the people there.
Sure.
So they said was, we believe Comcast must also understand that if it wants to do business here, it has a responsibility to the public, not just to the shareholders. This is a problem these days across the country, and it needs to be addressed in municipalities just like Albuquerque. Who is going to do that? Well, the municipality working in conjunction with folks in the community. And they should treat the public not as a problem. We're talking about the city. They should treat the public not as a problem, but as the city's responsibility to do the best for the community.
That would, the last bit was more focused at the city, the first part of Comcast?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, for sure.
Just out of curiosity, who finalizes the contract?
City council.
So the city council is sort of the organization that has responsibility for the public access.
Well, the franchise agreement, as I understand it, I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand it, the franchise agreement then gets codified as a city ordinance, and names the franchisee in that ordinance. So it's a legislative act, and therefore the responsibility of the city council to
The
actually
city
pass
council is
the
the
act
has the final say on contracts.
on this franchise agreement.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean,
And
contracts of a
the
certain
mayor
size.
can't override it.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, you can, you veto some stuff.
Well, you could veto a legislative act.
We can effectively turn it off if he wants to by.
And then he gets overridden if they have a vote, if they have 6 votes.
Does anybody know the specifics about that?
About the
Well,
process?
we have an attorney here.
You mean the process of passing the
Yeah,
ordinance?
if the city council, let's say, they won't do this, but let's say the city council passes the franchise agreement with X amount of money, and the mayor says, I'm vetoing it. Just can he or she do that?
No.
Can you say any more than just no? I mean,
What do you want me to say?
If the council passes an ordinance, for the franchise,
Negotiates the
can the mayor,
do something that was
No.
no? Okay.
Well, but can you explain, honestly, this is a genuine question. Can you just explain the process? Is there like a
You have to slow
six-member
down.
override or something, or how does it work? I mean, some of the public have been led to believe the mayor could just rubber stamp it and it's over with. So there are certain people in the community who feel like it's hopeless if he does whatever.
Yeah, that's true. The mayor
Yeah.
does have a right to veto. But in these processes, That's why it takes 2 years. The first year is an informal process, and there is an attempt to either find out that Comcast has violated the existing ordinance, or that it is in violation of federal requirements. And that would be one option under the federal law, that the city would deny renewal. But the other option is that the city will negotiate, and sometimes the company comes up with an agreement, a proposed agreement, and then sometimes the best practice, according to advocates around the country, is for the locality to come up with a model ordinance. And then if there's an agreement, the administration would be involved in that agreement, and there would be not a veto. So that's not usually how that works
So
in the cable television.
From my lay perspective, in something this big and far-reaching, in effect, the legislative and executive branches work together to try to work it out.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, that's right.
Okay. So that while the formality is, if it's a legislative act, the mayor can veto it, because they've done all this prior work, it probably wouldn't happen.
Right.
If that makes
They're working
sense.
in unison.
Well, they're working as a city rather than as one branch against another.
Well, that's what this person is here.
So we've got somebody from the legislative branch, we've got people from the executive branch, yeah, they're trying to do this as a big deal, so it's a cooperative.
A lot of money.
This
is a whole lot of
is
money.
like any legislation that works in any government entity. In this case, the mayor will send the legislation to the city council. The city council then votes on it, yes or no. The mayor has sent it down. The mayor is not going to send down something that he doesn't believe in, that he thinks is, what he wants to send to the council. The council has the opportunity to vote it up and down, however they wish. If they vote it down, then the mayor has the opportunity to veto that vote, and then it goes back to the council, and the council then has, if they have 6 votes, they can override the veto.
But in most of these cases, it doesn't get to those kind of situations. I find it interesting, Jane talked about the first year, which is basically 2016, will be an informal process. And that means that as yet undesignated people from the city will be working with representatives from Comcast to figure out how to, what could be formulated. And then in 2017, or late 2016 and throughout 2017 would be the more formal process.
So at first it's a negotiating process, and then it's finalized, is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes. Yes, and it takes a long time because there are so many aspects to
I'm
this.
sorry, point of clarity on what you just said, will the ordinance language therefore originate with the mayor's office and not council? Because that's how it sounded.
I believe that's how it will work, yes.
But again, I think this is now the formal process, and if the informal process does its job, these are just formalities.
These are just formalities?
At that point, it would be like whether it comes from the mayor or comes from the... I'm sorry. You're right, it came out wrong. I appreciate that, Alan. Yes, you got it, that's right.
And don't take what I said as gospel. That's just the way I think that this is supposed to work.
No, I think that that's
right.
correct, and
That's
I'm
correct.
sorry that, I think that I had a rigid idea of this process. So thank you for that, Dave. That's perfectly accurate.
So,
And the city is committed to the INET and it's committed to PEG.
To what?
To
PEG.
so that's public access, education, and government.
Well, then there will be a fruit from that, positive fruit. If they are
What did you
committed.
say? What is-
We'll have positive fruit from that.
I have a question.
Which I mean, that's everybody's hope here, yes, please.
If we have DirecTV and we have Dish, so it,
I'm sorry?
and we have internet, is it just, in the law, just the Comcast that gets this, that gets public access? Or you can't have public access on the internet too?
That's a good question.
You
That's a
know,
good
why
question.
is it just cable? You know, we go back to 2002, we're 15 years later. You know?
Part of the reason for that is because
Yeah.
when the FCC
Yeah.
made the determination that cable companies must provide PEG channels to a community that has a franchise if the community wishes, there were no satellites that were being used for anything other than government
I
purposes.
know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
you know, and 15 years ago, there were, whomever had made those decisions through the FCC, and as it went through the Cable Act of '86, apparently there was no reason to do that, and because the cable is in the ground and it's a franchise portion of the community in which the cable company is utilizing the rights of way, then they were granted that option to ask for the PEG channels. The satellite companies, I can't answer that part of it, but at least I can tell you the history on the other part.
Or even put some of it on the internet too.
But I think, well, Stuart, you open up, I think, a pretty important door here, at least from my perspective. One is that, 15 years ago, technology was a lot different.
The what?
Technology was different, and there's been a lot of change. And we can only imagine going forward 5, 10, 15 years, what changes might take place. So, nobody has a crystal ball, but the lessons that you're, I think, pointing to might inspire us to try to come up with an innovative way of crafting an agreement. So, I don't know what you guys think about including internet in the agreement going forward, in requiring that in the bundling, or duration of the agreement. I don't know. In other words, I just think you bring up a good point that things change over that time period, and what does that mean about an agreement going forward?
Okay, so on the website, we were very careful to point out that under the federal law, the ordinance can only, the franchising authority, so the city of Albuquerque only has the power to regulate cable television. But around the country, local authorities, franchising authorities, have negotiated concessions or are attempting to negotiate concessions on the internet. And I think we mentioned at one of the other meetings that the state of the law is in some flux right now. The FCC has designated in an order that internet providers are common carriers, and that, of course, is related to the FCC's concern around net neutrality, right? So if an ISP or an internet provider is common carrier, then they're not allowed to limit access to people that want to have access. So that tells me that maybe there's some other areas that the localities will be able to regulate, because the feds have designated internet providers as common carriers, but we don't know yet. We may know by 2017. But whatever happens, I would really hope, as a person that works for the city government, and also as a person that lives in this community and cares deeply about this community, that we can be united somehow, because we're not going to get, we're not going, you know, there is a threat of Comcast trying to take back some of the things that the communities have won around the country. They do want to dismantle INET. And the best chance of Albuquerque maintaining that institutional network, that's what INET stands for, and the public access and educational and government channels, is for the communities to be united, including the government. The people in the government are not the enemy. We should be working together.
So, this is very much aligns with the larger point over there. Yes,
Well,
please.
so, but on that note, which I'm 100% with you on what you just said. There's no division here between you and I right now. But on that note, so when I've had discussions, because I came to this from California activism and seeing the devastation of their public access stations, and there's an entity called the Buskey Group that is a very powerful legal entity that looks into all the franchise laws and franchise agreements. And I have had many conversations with Sue Buskey, and she says, seldom if ever has the city of Albuquerque reached out to her and asked her anything about
Has the city of Albuquerque what?
Has the city of Albuquerque reached out to her and asked her, with her massive database of knowledge about what's happening and how it's happening and what you guys can do, has reached out to her about anything? So I think that's good.
Okay, could I say just one thing, and then, you know, I'll just turn it back to you, okay?
Sure.
All right, so we actually, all of us, were part of a webinar just a few weeks ago, where Sue Buskey gave a presentation. And we were hanging on to her every word. You know, we're trying to learn from these consultants. She is a consultant. She works for a living. She tries to get clients. That's her bread and butter. She makes contracts with local governments. And so I think we also mentioned that we do have a contract, the city of Albuquerque, with Garth Ashbaugh, who's also a very well-known consultant. He and Sue Buskey are, if you want to say it, they're competitors, you know, in some ways. You know, they're both consultants. And so we do have a contract with Garth Ashbaugh, and he will be helping the city. We have 2 years to work this out. And, you know, my hope, and I'm going to give it back to you,
go ahead.
is that we can look at some plans where we can work together. But we have 2 years, and the Guards is coming, and I don't know what else the city, you know, policymakers and the city administration will be able to commit to in terms of resources, you know, paying.
Right.
Garth and Sue are pretty much the top two in the country.
Yeah.
You know, and as she said, they are competitors. We're working with one.
Right.
So here's, go ahead, Al. And then-
You know, I'm listening, I'm hanging on your every word also. And I'm trying to understand how it would be equitable, how would the path be equitable in terms of turning the station over to whoever they're going to turn it over to, and not be answerable to what has already gone down in terms of, you know, this pot of money went to, what's it called, U Public over here, and there was a whole lot more. There was a lot more than 220,000. It was given to the other channel, and we were operating. I mean, is there going to be any answers, or do you expect that there'll be answers about what has happened up to now, which was egregious, or clearly, you know?
Okay, so this is the time to mention that there's a lawsuit going on between quote unquote and the city administration, and those of us who are here on behalf of the city cannot, of course, discuss that lawsuit. In fact, I don't know anything about the lawsuit. That is not on my caseload. However, I suspect that some of the issues that you all have been raising here through the meetings, and you're welcome to bring it up, but they will be discussed and decided, not discussed, they will be litigated, they will be decided in the lawsuit. You know, some of these things that you're bringing up maybe decide in the lawsuit. So we cannot discuss the lawsuit here.
No, that's fair enough. But you know something, what you just did, just telling us a little bit about the problem. Clearly, the biggest problem is the public trust is just eroded. And we want to trust, we want to believe. You saw Portia getting teary-eyed about what that station meant to us. It meant a lot to a whole lot of people. And now it's basically black and ads. So it's because of the love people have had for that station for 30 years that we're here. And it's a longing for that energy and that community and that flow and that, and when you open up and tell us about the process, suddenly our trust comes back, suddenly we breathe again, suddenly it feels like we're being heard, suddenly we understand what you're doing. It's just this, honestly, I have to say, your lack of posting IPEG meeting minutes has massively eroded public trust. And I don't understand why that has to be. You guys are allocating funds from a public resource, and there's no way to even get into the meetings, much less find out when they're posted, much less have any meeting minutes. So all we're saying is, we're not here to punch you in the face, we're here to find out what you're doing. And it's been 4 years of really obfuscation and stuff, and just you saying that, just you telling us that little bit you told us about the process and how much work you're doing, already I feel about 300 times more positive about the path that we're on than I did when I walked in just before this meeting. So your transparency right there, if that could continue with the city, you wouldn't be having anything like the kind of perceived animosity that you've experienced, because we just want to know where our money's going and why one of the best public access stations in the country got completely taken away from us. So it's just building trust.
Just a second, Simon, and I just want to say, and therefore, all of these conversations have taken their own path. You put out an agenda and then they go where they're going to go. And Jane, this is the second time you've talked about the possibility of citizenry and city government forming common cause to make sure that the franchisee, in this case Comcast, provides the best service it can. I'm wondering whether there are ideas tonight on how that could actually happen over the informal period of 2016.
Well, I have another question. Is all the meetings, anybody from Comcast representative at the meeting?
They were not specifically invited, but they knew about it, and they haven't.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
They haven't shown up.
Okay, so you.
But this is a fact.
I know, but you public did show up and Comcast didn't show up.
Two major entities.
Okay. I
Okay.
would say.
What do you
Simon wanted to say something, and then Steve. Okay.
Like Laura said, openness, and I remember the chief administrative officer of the city, I believe he was actually the city attorney at one time also, going, the reason why they awarded a contract, because they said we're going in a different direction, but he didn't say which direction that was. And, I could say, well, I'm going in a different direction too. What direction is that? There's vagueness, not being clear about things. So this builds mistrust, and you think you're being, you believe to be deceived. And this needs to be, fixed.
Okay.
And again, that's why these people are bringing up again a lot of what we've been told is the process, what has been the process. And again, there needs to be answers by the administration, I believe, in order to, they need to be open then so people can believe. Well, we don't know, if you don't know, then all you can do is imagine.
Okay. Point taken. Steve?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up another issue, not exactly like this one, but it's about internet and cost for internet.
Yeah.
I was wondering do we know if the cost for internet here in Albuquerque is the same across the nation, or is it different? Is it higher that we're paying, or is it lower than we're paying? Because I think that's an issue that should be.
Even if we don't know that, the inference I'm taking is that should be part of the needs assessment or negotiation.
Yeah.
Try to figure that out.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's an easy answer, but it certainly is something, it actually, from where I'm sitting, aligns well with Laura's point about fair market valuation
Right.
and comparative market evaluation stuff. Yeah.
I don't know what percentage of the population in Albuquerque doesn't have Comcast, doesn't have satellite, and they just have over the air.
Mhm.
And in 2008, people get a little box to make it analog to digital, so they could watch over-the-air TV. And you could have 4.1, 4.2, you could have even 31, 125.
Yeah.
Those sideband channels. And I was wondering what it cost for the people that have public access over the air to, you know, you could go, there's about 20 religion channels, from 31 to 5 and 32 to 5, and even KOM could do something like that, do a sideband channel. And technology, where, you know, everybody has cell phones and iPads, but there's a lot of people that don't have the money for cable or satellite.
So I'm just trying to get the point you're
Yeah.
trying to make about the agreement. Are you saying that there should be some valuation of that, some assessment of how many people?
No, we should, with the technology today,
Yeah.
it should be over there too besides Comcast.
Oh, okay.
You know, there's people that can't afford cable or satellite.
I'm sorry, it's maybe an ignorant question, but are the PEC channels put out on air now? Or is it strictly through
It's just.
Cable and internet.
Yeah.
Does the capacity exist to put them through there?
To go where? Well, you would have to apply for a broadcast, you know, low power TV or high power TV license and all of that it entails. But what I'm hearing you say is intriguing, because it seems to me what you're suggesting is that these broadcast channels, some of which we spoke with last night, do have those sub-channels, and maybe they're an opportunity, and frankly, last night, pretty much all of them said, we're for free speech and we're for public access. Maybe they need to be approached as as an avenue for public access over the air.
And since I'm an idealist, the FCC should make a distinction between over the air and as far as profanity and nudity and cable or satellite. In other words, if you don't have cable or satellite, you're second class when it comes to art or theater. You could watch Get TV and you could see a picture of a nude and they blur it out. You know, great painting.
Right.
So the FCC's behind the times with over the air. Over there should be treated just like cable or satellite, with freedom of speech and art and theater. But I don't know when that's going to happen.
Right.
So you have to go to HBO or Showtime that have no censorship.
I think it's useful to bring this up
You know.
and say,
You know, I'm just saying.
just to acknowledge that the city can try to influence the feds, but
You can try to what?
that influence the feds, but it might be a
I
little
mean,
hard to do.
we're behind the times.
But yes, Laura and then Simon.
So speaking of what you're saying, which is fascinating, I mean, I'm all for just the maximum amount, that's the whole point of the internet, is the maximum amount of people, a tiny village in India with one light bulb could
Right.
still have access to maximal data. So I'm totally for that. The only thing people don't understand is, and Steve can certainly speak to it, the requirements to run a public access station are extremely stringent, both on a national and a local level. And that's one of the things that the community is so disturbed about, is the complete lack of supervision by the city over an absolutely out of control, no correspondence to what the programming requirements are and what they're putting out. So it's one thing to say, oh, the community needs more of this or that. But that community had darn well better be able to provide what is called local origination, meaning it has to originate in the community, and secondarily, first run. So it has to be the first time you've ever seen it when that thing comes on. And so, and UPublic hasn't even come close to like 1/90th of those requirements. So what I'm saying is that's a wonderful idea as long as everybody understands the tremendous responsibility and requirements of complying with the laws for any kind of public access station. They're very stringent because it's easy to do things like what UPublic is doing, which is to skim by and collect a check. So the requirements are very intense. And if a community who doesn't have cable is willing to stand up and really do the extremely hard work it takes to meet those requirements, absolutely they should be sitting at the table. I'm just saying they should have the same requirements as cable in terms of how much programming, how much has to be local, and how much has to be the first time you've seen it. So I think it's a fascinating idea as long as it's following the same guidelines that already exist.
Thanks, Lara. Simon?
Stuart brings up a very interesting censorship, and it should be clarified. I mean, I found out about public access in 1996, I believe, because there was a man who appeared on public access naked. And I was working with some very conservative, well, they would call it some very conservative people, and they were kind of outraged, and I said, well, it's public access. I said, you can go on and you can rebut his naked butt. But anyways, I said, because they thought, they were disgusted. I go, well, you don't have to, years ago, I heard a comedian say, if you don't like something, change the channel. But who is in charge of deciding what can or cannot be censored? And how is this enforced? Or that includes programming and taped and live. And I think those, I don't know if that's a contractual issue because, or do both parties, see again, who enforces, I'm sure in this contract, there are probably certain specifics that are going to have to be written up in this.
Right.
I imagine it's a very elaborate contract when it's all said and done. It's not just a one-page thing, here, sign here, and all these ambiguities. And so I think a lot of things, and I think it's a big issue, is censorship and First Amendment rights.
So clarify not only programming guidelines, but well, boy, it's hard to talk about editorial content, but anyway.
Yeah,
Well,
and who has, what do you call it? It's not priority, but who owns editorial, who's the owner of these programs? Is it the person that produces it, or is it the management company that oversees it? That manages it. I think that needs to be clarified.
Good point.
Also.
Very good point. Alan, you wanted to say?
Thanks.
Okay.
Can I clarify something, Simon? You're talking about general programming overall of cable television that you're talking about, or?
Kind of general, but then even specific, because when I remember signing a contract, and I believe we had to sign that we would abide by certain FCC rules, that we would refrain from certain type of language, certain type of visuals, because of the time slot. And we had to initial this and say that we would abide by this. And as long as we did this, it didn't matter what, content was up to us, because I remember someone calling up and complaining about the content, and the person who answered the phone for the management said, we do not, content is up to the producer and not to us. As long as they're within FCC rules, we have no say about content. Content.
Yeah. Yes.
I just realized that every time we did a show, there was like a 9-pager we had to go through to comply with the rules, I guess.
Yeah.
I know I had, in addition to, I was hosting a show, I did a documentary show at 10 o'clock at night. And there was, and I got all kinds of feedback, positive and negative, but the documentaries were often very controversial, or areas of extreme conflict, and who are the players, and what's happening, why did it happen, what's going to happen. And people, there were people, not a lot, but a few people that called up and said, you know, you shouldn't show that. And said, well, we're showing it at 10 o'clock because that's courtesy for somebody, you know.
Younger viewers.
Yeah.
Whatever.
For whatever reason,
Yeah.
because the parents don't want the child to see something or whatever. But you're right. I forgot all about that checkoff list.
Yeah,
every week.
Well, it was every time when you did a show.
Yeah.
You became a producer. You assigned responsibilities as a producer that you would abide by.
And I have another question to you, I guess, unless somebody else can answer it. If Comcast is seen as not up to snuff, is there an alternative? To use the same,
I can't answer.
to use it, no, to have, then the equipment or the infrastructure for cable television would then shift over to,
All right, so.
do they own it?
First of all, the franchise is non-exclusive, so other companies can come here. But the market, and we've discussed this at some of the SOs, maybe a little repetitive, but the way the market for cable television is structured, unlike, for example, telephone, the incumbent or the main company in the community does not have to share its infrastructure, so that when you look on the map, the big companies, the top 5, do not intrude in each other's territory. Although sometimes when you look at some of the you have one big one and a small one. And so the city is not opposed to other companies coming in. Now, if the city, in addition to doing the needs assessment is related to, I'm really sorry. I think I only had 3 hours of sleep last night. I had a deadline, and it was so yeah. And I apologize for being a little on the short-tempered side. My brain's not working very well either. So anyway, and that's why I'm talking slowly, but I'll pick up the speed. So so that's the market. Now on the legal side, I already kind of mentioned that under the federal law, and you have to remember who makes up these laws, who has the influence in Congress or whatever. So under the federal laws, once a company is in a market, the renewal can be denied only for certain legal reasons. So those are the billing practices, signal quality, customer service, programming, and I think that I appreciate the discussion yesterday because I think that Steve was talking about it, and it focused for me the kind of discussion about programming that franchising authorities and communities can have with the Comcast. So you can't say, I don't like this channel, or I don't agree with the switch out or the lineup, but you can talk about overall groups of programming being deficient.
Balance.
And negotiate and criticize. And I think, but I bet that that's, from a legal perspective, a hard case for a franchising authority to make.
Excuse me for interjecting, but on the handout with the color thing, this is a reason why there are those bullets just above the color. We talked about billing practices, customer service, because, if I may, Jane, these are the issues upon which the franchising authority, the city, may make a case for denying the franchise, the franchise for renewal, or can hold the franchisee's feet to the fire because they haven't been doing a good enough job. And so if they don't outright deny it, they can say, you guys have really got to, you have to improve on these areas because these are the legal teeth, if you will, that we have in talking, in making you guys do some improvements. I stammered through that. Is that about right?
Yeah, and so.
So these were not just listed because we thought them up. It's because it's in the law.
You know, on a high level, again, we're all kind of getting into this whole process in the city government. But so earlier when I said that we were listening to a webinar with Sue Buskey, it was through the National Association of Television Officials, something like that, NATOA. And so we have, besides that webinar, we have been in touch with some of the other, more active attorneys that represent local governments around the country. And one of them was saying that the needs assessment is important, but the past performance is a more powerful tool to maintain a good negotiations.
Did you say past performance?
Past performance.
Experience?
Yeah, well,
Past performance of the franchisee, of Comcast.
Well, that's a key piece of.
Is rather than, well, we collect a lot, does that make sense? The needs assessment is something, but really an assessment of their past performance is what's going to really get to the table.
That's going to be part of what goes down.
That's why that's another reason why taking the survey is really important.
So Gene, so my question, which I think was what Alan was headed towards, was, so what recourse, so let's say we determine they aren't really up to snuff. What recourse do we have, or is this really a kind of monopolistic, not much we can do?
We just looked at other jurisdictions and they are able to use violations. And I did ask one of the lawyers, how do you make that into real leverage, real bargaining power?
Right.
And, you have to have something that shows that they violated the law and that you will report them to the FCC.
But so let's say you just reached the end of your rope with them. Who would we have as an alternative? Is there one?
And so then I was going to talk about that. So what happens, generally these companies are not going to give up their infrastructure because obviously it's very valuable. And so under the ordinance, it says that if the franchise is terminated, then the company has to remove its cable, its, network, the lines.
Infrastructure.
Physically.
Physically remove them at the company's own cost. This probably has never happened anywhere, but that's the way, the ordinance actually reads that way. And, sometimes this happens too, like a company will go bankrupt, right? So that happens. And then through the bankruptcy court, maybe because the court is worried about the bankrupt company paying its creditors, then it will, make a sale, and so then the infrastructure goes to another company. But in the ordinance, it says that if the cable company does not remove its infrastructure, then it can be condemned or it can be taken over by the city. That, realistically, that's not going to happen. Comcast is at the top of the heap. It owns, it's at the top for cable, it is at the top for media production, through the what company does it own that makes?
NBC.
Universal, NBC, right? Universal, right? NBC. So it's controlling not just distribution, but it's controlling production of the content.
Right.
So that's not going to happen. So I don't want to sit here and make false expectations. That's not going to happen. But at the same time, they are subject to the law. And I'm a regulatory lawyer, and I know administrative law. I have worked at the PRC and worked for state government, and now I work for city government. And that's other than working for legal aid, which I did for 11 years, and public defender for for 5. So that was the first
Really?
half. Yes, that was the first half of my career.
No, I'm impressed. I'm impressed because I used to do the same thing.
Yeah, so,
That's how I
but
know.
anyway, I really love regulatory law. I went to that part after I did legal aid and public defender for 16 years. That was the first half of my career. I love regulatory law, and there's always hope. The community should not give up on it. And even though it feels as if we can't do anything about it, we have to look at the details. We have to, that's what, the survey, maybe there's some other things we can do, I don't know. I don't have that much power in the city government. But, we're gonna look around for violations. Sometimes you don't need to have massive trends, sometimes you can find violations in other ways. And I'm not setting up Comcast to fail, that's not it either, but at the same time, the government has to be diligent and make sure that it has been following the law. So we are going to do that. And but I have to also say that it's going to be hard I think that it's hard to have enough violation that you have the basis to actually say no. That's a hard battle to fight. But I know that other jurisdictions have found violations and they just use it as a negotiating tool. That you have to come up to speed and this is how you can show us your good faith. And, they also are sensitive to their public relations. So that's why I think that it's a good thing for people in the community to think about how they're going to work together, because there is a possibility of something good coming out of this, and we have 2 years to work on it.
Well, Jane, I just want to offer you one more thing, because I could get you that information. I know there was a couple of municipalities, I can't remember, I think one was like in Washington and one was in like Oregon or something, but what they had done was, rather than giving back the channels, they had negotiated themselves a sale, and the revenue they used from that, they turned into the infrastructure to start their own station. So they took their public access asset into their own hands, put it on the market, got the revenue from that, and that became their infrastructure, and they became totally independent of the whole system. Not like that's something you guys want to do tomorrow or something, but if you're interested, I could get you that information.
Yes,
it's fascinating.
We're interested. Thank you.
APS is thinking about going independent. Yes, Simon.
So, I was wondering if I could ask a question of the administration. So because of Comcast's experience, we shouldn't think about even changing because of their experience and what they've been providing through their channels, because the city sort of like grants them a license to put in the infrastructure because of their experience in providing the service. We shouldn't think of the people that think of terminating or this relationship between Comcast and the city. I'm just wondering if that's a question that can be answered by anybody from the.
I thought Jane did a pretty
Well,
good job.
I was going to ask, these are the people, I believe Mr. Matthews and Mr. Ayers are going to be putting in a lot of suggestions to the administration. This is what we believe we should ask of Comcast. When you go to negotiate, you're going to be part of this team that's going to put out paper. She's just going, this person here is just going to advise the legality of it, right?
All these folks are advisory. The negotiating team has not been named.
But yeah, they're just like a search committee kind of sort of thing.
The needs assessment.
Yeah, needs assessment. So I was wondering, based on what they know, they would recommend continuing to negotiate with Comcast in good faith because of experience that Comcast has and their history. What they've done is good. So they should, I was wondering, is it possible to answer a question like that by the administration?
I don't know if you want to answer that, but what I got from Jane was the market reality is that no other company is going to enter in. And So on a simplistic level, you could say we're stuck with Comcast. At the same time, Comcast has enormous incentives for negotiating an agreement so that they don't lose their infrastructure and all the money and all the valuation that goes along with it. So there are powerful incentives and then there are legal issues that the city can refer to that would keep Comcast not only at the table, but hopefully help them negotiate in good faith.
I was wondering, see, what I'm saying is...
But I don't know that anybody else, we're not expecting anybody else.
What if I went and filed with the state corporation committee that I wanted to start a cable company, and I came in with negotiations with the city, said I'd like to bid on this contract, I'd like to provide these services, and I'd like to get, what are you looking for, and what kind of numbers are we talking about? And if it's a competitive bid, with my bid, because let's say I gave a more competitive price, would it have precedence over Comcast's bid? Even though I'm not experienced, I don't have any, I was just wondering, would my bid be tendered and would it then be accepted because of the bidding process? I offered to do it for less money, per se. I wonder, would the city have to take my bid?
You're not, Jane said it's non-exclusive, so you could do that.
Yes, you can do that. And so in other jurisdictions, and I'm not an expert on this yet, but in other jurisdictions, the Comcast or the whatever, the kind of like the incumbent, the main company has negotiated these clauses where if a new company comes in, they can't undercut, so they call them equity clauses or something like that.
They have negotiated this with the city here also?
Yeah, well, that's not happening here, but in other places where it's happened.
Oh, it's already, you're saying this has happened
in other places?
Yeah, in other
Here
places.
that doesn't exist at the moment?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't. But, another reason why, you're not gonna have cable companies running in here is because, and I'm hearing this from some of the experts in Natawa, is because the experts view the cable television market as on a decline, and we see that in the headlines, right?
Right.
And so, what's on the upswing is like CenturyLink doing its streaming or whatever, and Verizon has the BIOS, and CenturyLink has something else. So, it's either on demand or it's streaming. And so, in a way, one of the experts we talked to said, if the city's interested in competition, you'd be looking for that type of provider as opposed to another cable provider, right? So that's going on too.
Ellen, and then
I feel clear. I've gotten a lot more clarity in my. One of the questions I had a question and a suggestion. I know everybody's tired and wants to go home, but this is really critical. I would like to see another round of public comment sessions. Doesn't have to be 5, it could be 3, but where they're really well communicated out in the community, so people who care about it. This is like, it's just not there. I mean, I'm not pointing at anybody, I'm just saying that if you want feedback, you've got to give people both the information and the time to make that plan.
Okay.
The other thing I want to know is, this is a preliminary gathering. I understand that, but who makes the decision, who's going to be on the panel that makes the decision? And because I don't want to be a part of it. Of course, I wouldn't be because I'm already committed with indie media and public access television. But I'm worried about the money, and I said that last night. And I'll keep worrying about it because a friend of mine who shall remain nameless told me that if you want to know what's going on any issue, follow the money. and you'll find out what's going on. So my question is, I hope that you will have another round and let me know, and I'll we could, put the word out.
Okay.
We can get much more feedback. And I've got to say, as an Anglo man, I think that people who are on this preliminary and the final round should include Indian people, should include women, African Americans. There should be a cross section of the community represented. I'm highly conscious that I worked with Martin Luther King, and one of the first things I learned is that if you don't have diversity, you ain't got it. And
All right,
I just
thank
want
you.
to nail that.
Thank you. Yes.
So, Jane, this was interesting. You triggered something in me. So this Seattle thing, they're talking about negotiating back and forth on this deal with Comcast. And Constantine, I guess, was the mayor of the town or something. Constantine contended there are some positive...
slow down, I can't.
Sorry.
You gotta slow down.
Constantine contended there are some positive aspects to the proposed deal. For example, it would maintain Comcast's support of a fat, quote, data pipe that benefits county government and library systems. It also provides the county the right to split one of its existing analog channels into 4 digital channels. That was back in 2003. Now an analog channel can be about 30. So that might be something to negotiate as well, speaking to what you were talking about with wireless. Because, streaming, quote unquote, has been, from the little they've been able to keep going, they've been planning on streaming for a long time because they know that's where it's all headed anyway.
Right.
So if you guys could also, if you could negotiate within that deal, the ability to split that up into actual digital channels that could be utilized for what he was talking about, like what happens to us who have digital. So apparently that's back in 2003, they were already having that discussion.
7:30. And as Alan indicated before, I think people are starting to maybe get a little tired, but the conversation has been really rich. And I also want to thank the folks from the working group who were able to chime in and really offer some clarification on a number of points. So thank you so much for your
I'm really
points.
sorry, Comcast, and I keep getting it wrong. You public. I'm sorry that they're not here.
So anyway.
They're major players. And
So here's where we're going to go. I'm sorry, Alan, but what we're going to do is we have to sort of pull all the findings and themes of the 5 groups together. It won't be a transcription. It won't be a list of all comments. It'll be a summary, and that summary will be probably a couple weeks. It'll be on the website, and so yes. Anyway, thank you so much. And then the needs assessment. Whenever information becomes available,
thank you, Missy. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. That was fantastic.
You're welcome.
You really you brought a lot of clarity on that.
And thank you for all your for coming tonight.
Would you like some help putting this?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thanks, Simon. Have a safe trip going home.
Oh, here we go. Really? Oh, that's
Yeah, I got you. And I get really your point. I mentioned the city last night.